Hello, and welcome to Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble. I am really excited today for the podcast that we're having. It's really great because I have Karen Ferguson with me today from Cora. And Cora is a nonprofit here in California, and they provide safety, support, and healing to individuals who have experienced domestic violence issues. And they're also into educating the community, which is really, I think, important on the topic of domestic violence. So I am so excited you're with me today, Karen. Welcome.
Thank you, and lovely to be here.
Great. So I'm really interested to hear from you about what inspired you to get involved with Cora.
I have to say that I think my life is one of those where the dots connect better looking backwards. So I can't say that I necessarily was pointed in this direction. My entire career has been in public service and in nonprofit work. I originally trained as a clinical psychologist and worked very early on in public hospitals, got really fascinated in working within issues of poverty and issues of diversity. Then had opportunities to travel and to develop a career that ended up being more about immigration and refugee work. But within that was always this flow of women's empowerment and also always having to work around domestic violence issues. And after a long career in immigration and refugee work, I was actually in a hiatus trying to figure out, what do I do when I grow up kind of thing. And Cora reached out and recruited me. And I sort of said, a domestic violence organization as like the front-facing issue. I don't know if I can do that. And my amazing spouse said to me, you know what? You've always helped people who flee their homes due to violence. Isn't this the same thing? And
Wow.
I just said, it sure is. And so I ended up at Cora, and I've been here for 4 years now.
And how has it been these 4 years? I'm sure that a lot has happened. I'm interested to know what some of the big events since you've been there in 4 years.
I think that even though I can't quite get my mind around this, we're 5 years from supposedly the beginning of the pandemic, right? I do think that the pandemic had a incredibly intense impact on nonprofit work and on social services work. So I will say that I think one of the biggest changes for Cora over time has been one, they moved into the pandemic before I joined, but coming out. And in what ways are we returning to some way of being before the pandemic? And what ways are we changed forever? So
Yes.
I do think that that was a huge piece. And there was a lot that went along with that, rebuilding a lot of relationships, rebuilding staffing, rebuilding some of the programs. And within that, I had the opportunity then to connect and to develop new programs. So over the past 4 years, Cora has definitely developed a lot of new programs, has re-engaged with community. And I still think every 3 months, we're still having a new normal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell us about your approach to leadership.
Hmm. I think first and foremost, I am one of those leaders who grew up within nonprofit work. In fact, I do say to the staff that I have sat in most of your seats. So I have been the case manager, I've been the therapist, I have been, the outreach coordinator, I've been the volunteer manager, all of those different positions early on in my career. And so I very much am somebody who rolls up my sleeve, who wants to be very engaged in programming. I think the second thing about me as a leader is that for me, the client is absolutely center. And so I think people say that a lot, but for me, I have a very hard time, in fact, doing some of the things that I'm supposed to do as a CEO until I feel that everything we're doing for the clients is absolutely with excellence. And the staff really, I think, resonate with that. They feel good when they see that the leader cares first and foremost about what's happening to the client. And I approach things that way. So I want to hear staff have incredible expertise in how to do best by clients. So I want to hear from the staff when an issue comes up. I want to understand all of the perspectives, and then in the same way that we sometimes talk about the best interest of the child, my first question is sort of what is in the best interest of this client? And then what is in the best interest of the agency? And then what is in the best interest of the community? And so I think that my leadership really is designed around that. I am somebody who loves program and how programs make an impact in lives. And I think the third thing is that people know me as kind of a data nerd. I really care about the numbers. So when somebody tells me that this program is just amazing, I'm like, that is wonderful. How? How is it amazing? How do you know it is amazing? Oh, everybody just loves it. But in what way is it actually changing lives? And should I tell just a really brief story?
Sure. We'd love a
Okay.
brief
So
story.
here's a brief story. Early on in my career, as I was getting involved in immigration and refugee work, I had the benefit of working with a lot of global programs as well. I wasn't directly involved with them, but I got to learn about them. There was a global program that was happening in two different rural areas where they were trying to combat teen pregnancy. And so there was the amazing education about reproductive rights program that everybody just thought it was so amazing. And these people came in and they gave education. The students were really into it and asked a lot of questions and got super involved. And the other one, all they did is set out bowls of condoms. The teen pregnancy rate significantly dropped in the area where the condoms were put out, not the area where the education happened. In fact, the
Wow.
education made very little dent in the teen pregnancy rate. So I think it probably, I am a clinical research psychologist. I'm trained in research, right? My guess is they asked the wrong question. I think the education probably helped with combating social isolation and peer support and having a better social network, but it doesn't necessarily stop you from getting pregnant.
What an engaging story for our viewers today. Thank you. Yeah, and I love this idea as a leader where we've sat in their seat and we can relate to the people that are working with us. It means so much to have had that experience and be able to speak from it.
Yeah.
In the past 4 years on this journey, has there ever been a time where you doubted your vision?
I think you're coming to me later in my career. So I don't think I doubt my vision. I doubt my capacity sometimes to do two things. One, to make sure that my vision has all of the input that it needs. So I am more and more aware as I move down my career path that the things I don't know probably outrank the things I do.
Interesting.
So I'm aware that I don't know things. And so sometimes I have vision and will think through, oh, maybe we should also add in. And then sometimes there's moments of doubt of, am I figuring out the best way to get this vision across to other people? So, definitely as a leader, many, many times, I just come up with an idea that I am convinced is fantastic, and nobody else in the room is agreeing. I'm far enough down to go, no, it is a darn good idea. I don't have a doubt in the idea anymore, although I might say maybe it's not well formed. Maybe I don't have all of the parameters worked out that clearly other people are seeing. But I think I'm more aware of I think it's attributed to Mark Twain. I think it actually isn't his, which is talking is easy. It's communication that's difficult.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So on this interesting career path you've had and journey, has there been a key influencer or mentor that you've had?
I've been really lucky to have a number of really wonderful supervisors and leaders in my life. So I think that I've had good mentorship. I, I think there is no such thing as a perfect leader, but they've all been just good people. I do think that this is why I stay in nonprofit work, is that one of the best benefits of nonprofit work is you're just constantly surrounded by people that have the same values, that really share a vision of the world that is about it is our job to make the world better.
Yes.
Um, I have a very early influence in my life that was not exactly a mentor, but when you say it, it's sort of like, well, it kind of is. So I can tell that story if you want, but it is
Yeah,
how I got
we'd
shaped.
love to hear it.
So early on in my career, I had the opportunity, and when you're young, you do bold moves. And so I took this job moving to American Samoa in the South Pacific as the psychology consultant for the territory of American Samoa. That's a crazy title. And so my job was to arrive there as a clinical psychologist. And I don't know, I fantasized myself as this like very well-meaning, big-hearted, compassionate person that was going to, I don't know, do some therapy and stuff. I had just gotten my PhD. I arrived, and probably one of the early mentors in my life, he said to me, the chief there that was over the social services, said, I never want you to see a single Samoan client the entire time you're here. And so I thought, okay, what do I do? And so I very quickly learned, oh, it's program design that I do. It's my job to teach everybody else how to do this. And he made it very clear. He's like, maybe you'll stay longer, but at some point you're going to leave. But this is our home. Your job is to teach us how to be here for each other. And so that was an early shaping, which was the falling in love with program design. And I'm so grateful. But in that process, I ended up taking over what is interestingly full circle, the domestic violence shelter. In the domestic violence shelter, when I went to go meet the staff and meet the clients and say, hey, part of my job is going to be to provide some consultation and support to you all, they introduced me to everybody in all the rooms of the shelter except one. And I asked, well, who's in the last room? And they said, that's the Sri Lankans. I said, what do you mean that's the Sri Lankans? And they said, oh, well, there's the women and children are here. The men are in the prison. This is a group of Sri Lankans that had fled Kashmir, actually, and had been trafficked through the South Pacific and had landed in American Samoa where there's no immigration laws. And they had been under house arrest for 4 years, languishing. And there was no hope for them to go anywhere, but they lived in the domestic violence shelter under house arrest, and the men stayed in the prison. And I just said, well, that just doesn't make any sense to my brain. Like, that is impossible. People can't just be stuck in house arrest for the rest of their lives. And so I started trying to figure it out, got connected with Amnesty International, United Nations High Commission on Refugees, and through a lot of networking on the island and through these international forces, I started learning about immigration and refugee processes, but was able to get the women and all but two of the men designated as refugees. And in the process, we were able to allow them out of house arrest once a week. And so we would take them to the beach. They hadn't even been able to enjoy Samoa, which is spectacularly beautiful. And I just, so I have two defining moments in my life. One was walking along the beach with this young woman named Vani, who was the same age as I was. And she was this, young Sri Lankan woman who had gone through all of this and was stuck. And I looked in her eyes and I thought, by sheer fate, she is she and I am I. And that has stayed with me, that it is by pure luck that we have the pathway that we have at some level, and that it is my duty to recognize that and to use what I have to help those who maybe didn't have my fate. My second defining moment of my entire life was that through moving through all of that refugee process after a year and a half, we got them accepted to New Zealand for refugee resettlement. And I had the honor of taking them to the plane and putting them on the plane and getting them out of American Samoa and resettled. There's more to that story that goes on, but those moments affected me to my core. And so when you say mentor, in some ways, Vani's my mentor.
Got
That
it.
that you can change people's paths by just caring and by just doing what's right. And that has driven me ever since.
What an engaging story. And I love that it came full circle, that you were able to see Vonnie on her journey in
Yeah.
a safe place and continue on. Really,
Yeah.
really amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that our listeners, especially our nonprofit leaders that will hear this, are going to be interested in hearing your successes and challenges about fundraising. What are
Hmm.
you willing to share with us?
Um, I think I can say fairly to nonprofit leaders that, as are many nonprofit leaders, it is not my favorite thing to do. I think what I have learned is that each of us needs to take what we have in terms of all of the experiences of doing mission-driven work and marry that with the fact that the community cares about mission-driven work. And that if we do that, then fundraising isn't about the dollar signs, but it's really about helping community invest in the safety net. And so I have learned that for myself, my best fundraising is to really just be myself, which is somebody who has spent 30 years deep in the work and has a million stories to share. And so, I, like many nonprofit leaders, I have somebody else who's way better at figuring out the ask. But I know that my statement to anybody is, here are some stories. This is what life looks like when we look at it from the perspective of somebody else who maybe doesn't have as much um, positive or going for them in their life as we might. We can all see that and we can understand that. And wouldn't we want to invest in that? Doesn't that make the world a better place if we do that? And so I think so often in this business, the fundraising gets called out as like, and now you do your fundraising job. And when I think of it that way, it's not my favorite thing. When
Yes.
it's, let's just get out there and share and partner and truly like weave a better tapestry, then there's no issue to it. And I'm happy to be out there and to share with people. So that's sort of my trick. I just sort of fake myself out.
I got and have somebody that knows how to do the ask, right?
Yeah, there's somebody else that does. I mean, truly the underbelly of fundraising is that, of course we are doing what's called wealth research and going like this person gives to these other foundations at this level, and they've just started with us at Cora. So really we could potentially, if we really engage with them, and I do believe in that. I do believe that to just go and think about it as the ask is the wrong way. People need to know, who are we? What are we standing for? What are we doing? And if they know that stuff, then sure, maybe this person, we don't ask for this amount, we ask for triple that amount. And that's the person that does the ask because they do the research and they know what might make sense.
yes,
Um, yeah, I've also learned to be less shy as you move through life in this. You really start to realize, you know what? The worst that happens is somebody says, gosh, no, I don't have that amount to give, but I see that you
I
need
got
it.
Yes, yes, yes. Or I have this amount. And for some of us, I've learned as well that the person that writes the thousand check and the person who gives four quarters, based on what they've got to give, the energy behind it and what they're experiencing while they do it is very similar. We
Yeah,
just have different places we come from.
absolutely.
Tell us about an unexpected challenge you've had at Cora and what happened.
Unexpected challenge at Quora. Um, I think one of the things that I love about Cora, and was fun to come into, again, as somebody who'd already been doing nonprofit leadership for a while, was that it is very stable. This is the first organization that owns their own buildings. And that was like, wow, that's interesting. So I think challenge number one is, holy moly, if you own your own buildings, then you have these staff called facilities people. And I have rented, and so I've had to have, like, I've had to deal with lots of leases and contracts and stuff. But then I just call the landlord when something floods, and now we have to have our own staff that figure that out. So that's been a new one for me as a facilities. But the unexpected challenge that always happens is you think something sounds great, like, right, the grass is always greener on the other side. So how wonderful to be at a nonprofit that has business buildings. Except my unexpected challenge is these buildings post-pandemic don't make sense. And so now we're going to need to look at how we re-leverage the buildings to get a brick and mortar that actually makes more sense to us in a post-pandemic world. And so what looked great at the start now means I am learning all about commercial and residential real estate.
Yeah, that pandemic. It's certainly challenged a number of things and brought us quite a few opportunities, I think, as well.
Yeah.
As leaders, whether it's in business or a nonprofit, we're often challenged with innovation versus sustainability of how do we have money to grow and even get technology that we need while still making sure we keep the lights on, so to speak, and follow our budget. What's that been like for you at Cora?
Cora for me really is doing a lot of what I have learned over my history. I adore ideas. I love out of the box thinking. I love creative new programs. And I learned fairly early in my career that, you know what, not everybody loves change and all new things. And so it is always that mix. And the same has happened with Cora, which is absolutely, I came into the agency where there had been a variety of change that had happened during the pandemic and the pandemic itself. And so it was a period of rebuilding and stabilization. And I've learned as a leader that really it is just sometimes repeating that over and over again. Like, this is stabilization, rebuilding, that we just need to recognize that everybody needs to see that that's the roadmap. And yet to also infuse it with some new creative things. And that's the trick to learn what the sum is. I know that my tendency is that my sum is bigger than others. So to really be able to, kind of read the room that, I definitely always get to a place. I've done this many times in my career now. I get to a place where I'm like, if I say one more new initiative, they're going to start throwing tomatoes. So we're done.
Yeah,
And
yes, yes.
yeah, and I just have really learned that I think that it's important, and I think this is true in life too, that we have times where we're taking on a new thing and then times where we have to stabilize and sort of rocks back and forth, whether that's a year to year or 6 month to 6 months. But I've sort of learned to have that mix of the two, of bringing in some new projects, because that's fun. It gets everybody engaged and energized. And as a nonprofit, it gets you out in the media and the community sees, some really interesting new thinking. And so they can engage with that. But then you've got to stop and stabilize and consolidate for a while to make sure that those are really done with excellence.
This read the room idea makes me think of another question that I want to ask you, please. And what leadership principles have you used in building out your team, your staff?
I think that I don't know if I'm not, I'm struggling with the word principles exactly. I think I have some guidelines, and I think that the nonprofit world is very different than what I assume the for-profit world is. See, I'm one of these people that has truly actually never worked in for-profit.
Profit
So
interest.
yeah, I just have sort of fantasies. Well, I did work at Ann Taylor in the shoe department early on in my life. Other than that, I have never worked in for-profit. So I think that I have a sense of how nonprofit works, and I do know enough to realize, oh, it is different. I do think nonprofit is a place where people grow. People really, well, two paths. One is that people come as an early exposure early in life, because that is a time when we get to be a little bit more idealistic and mission driven. And that's okay. And then there are the people that maybe come at a more entry level and really become your leaders. And so I do think one of my principles is looking for, I don't know, this feels paternalistic the way I'm saying, like the diamonds in the rough. I don't know, it's my job to pick the diamond in the rough, but I guess to see the potential of people,
Potential, yes.
to see the potential. I wonder if it's early on when you ask about mentors. Here's a mentor of mine. So early on, I was working in Alaska, and I got hired by a woman who was the executive director of a indigenous people's nonprofit that did all sorts of a wide range of healthcare. And she hired me, and I was one of six managers. When she hired me, she helped me know her story. She's a native, Alaska Native woman. She had started as the secretary of that agency. When she hired me, I was one of six managers. When I left that organization, I was one of 60 managers. And the year after, she won the McCarthy Foundation Award, the Genius Award, which she very much deserved. She started out as the secretary of the whole agency. And that to me is one of my principles of nonprofit, is that you're looking for what's the functional skill set I need? And looking for the people that really want that opportunity to take a mix of knowledge and life experience and build that into becoming leaders themselves. So probably my biggest pride in sort of my process of my principle of leadership has been growing other leaders. And I've successfully kind of two times, I hope maybe eventually with Cora, it'll be a third, is growing myself out of a job.
Yes.
I've had other people that have gotten to the place. And so I actually love doing that. I love meeting with the individuals that I directly supervise and building on their skill set, introducing them to sort of the next thing. Because I really believe, at least within nonprofit, that those of us that do this sort of CEO, executive director job, it is a very unique set of skills that mainly comes from learning by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think those of us that gain wisdom have a responsibility to share it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And it's fun. It's really, really fun.
Great to
I've
see
been
people grow. Yes.
It is, and to see people, because I like the data stuff, I'm always sort of asking about the data. But I've really enjoyed, like lately, with some of the leadership here, some of the data that I've been asking for, they're now owning more. And I'm saying, well, so tell me what you see in the data. And we're having these dialogues that actually just even a year and a half ago might not have been on their radar. And it is more. And as they do that, then they take on more of an interest in, well, then how do we know we're making impact? And so it doesn't become mine to have to own anymore.
Wonderful. Speaking of growing, where's Cora going to be in 5 years?
Hmm. I think we're going to have different facilities. So that'll be interesting because I do think, that the large sprawling central office building is just no longer doesn't make sense anymore. So definitely or Cora will have more of a dispersed footprint. I think that Cora is really deepening its very conscious intent in prevention and education work. And Cora has always said that that's been a piece of it. So you were reading, sort of our like, sharing like that's sort of our statement. But it's difficult to embrace that within nonprofit because despite the fact that everybody says that makes sense, that prevention be the way that you stop, for example, cycles of abuse, it isn't where the money is because if somebody is given a choice to pay for emergency shelter or, youth education, they pay for emergency shelter. And so it's hard to get the funding for that. But we have, ever since I came, and I think within the next 5 years, it will expand and deepen, is to really recognize that community can get around prevention. And it's really finding different partnership. We're a domestic violence agency, but working much more closely with the schools now, with public libraries. We wouldn't have thought of that before, but as we've really developed our prevention and education. So I think there's going to be a really strong presence of Cora in San Mateo County for prevention work. And I hope in 5 years that we just are able to look back and say, not only do we absolutely have excellent services in every area that we touch somebody, but that we can show you the metrics to prove it that we're making an impact, that we're making a difference.
Wow. Inspiring. With the depth and breadth of your experience, I'm curious one piece of advice you would give to a young nonprofit future leader looking to run a nonprofit one day. What would your piece of advice be for that person getting started with that vision?
I think it's the same advice that I give in general, all young people, which is, and I think it's running counter to a lot of what I see more lately, which is take every opportunity, take every pathway, volunteer, expose yourself. Don't pick a path and stay on it. Like, I really think, even if you're a young person who wants to be an executive director to someday, one, I'll say, are you nuts? Because I think anybody who wants to like point in that direction, that's an interesting choice early on. But if that is truly what you really want to be a leader, you have to have this toolbox that is just filled with, because truly an executive director is simply a jack of all trades with passion. So follow your passion and collect a ton of tools instead of like, this is the next rung that gets me up, because I think you will be a very narrow-minded executive director if you just take the rungs. So I am somebody who truly believes all people, and especially young people, should follow every left turn that is presented. Do not go straight. That
That's
collecting life
great.
experience is just it's what makes somebody have wisdom.
Yeah, Karen has given us a lesson here in empowerment and passion today. Karen Ferguson, we are so glad you joined us at Opening Pathways today from Cora. And in full disclosure, I'm a donor, and to my listeners, I hope you will be too. This is a very, very fine organization doing great work that is very needed in our society today. Karen, I'm really grateful you're here. To my listeners, this is Tom Lenoble with Opening Pathways. See you next time.